Part 4, Bible Landscapes, continuing. And he said to them, Do not fear, neither be alarmed, for all our enemies will be delivered into our hands, and you may do with them as you please. And all the men that went about were 500, and they fought against their enemies, and they destroyed them and subdued them. And Nimrod placed standing officers over them in their respective places. And he took some of their children as security. And they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren. And Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. And when Nimrod had joyfully returned from battle, after having conquered his enemies, all his brethren, together with those who knew him before, assembled to make him king over them. And they placed a regal crown upon his head. And he set over his subjects and people princes, judges, and rulers, and as is the custom among kings. And he placed Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of his host. And he dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. Commentary note here, Terah is going to be the father, of course, of Abram. And note here that he made him the prince of his host. In other words, he was pretty much one of the most powerful men under Nimrod's reign. Continue reading from the book of Jasher here. And whilst he was reigning according to his heart's desire, after having conquered all his enemies around, speaking about Nimrod here, of course, he advised with his counselors to build a city for his palace, and they did so. And they found a large valley opposite to the east, and they built him a large and extensive city. And Nimrod called the name of the city that he built Shinar, for the Lord had vehemently shaken his enemies and destroyed them. And Nimrod dwelt in Shinar, and he reigned securely, and he fought with his enemies, and he subdued them, and he prospered in all his battles, and his kingdom became very great. And all nations and tongues heard of his fame. Now notice here the way it says all nations and tongues, as though there were other variations and dialects of tongues in that time. That's a significant note in commentary here. Back to our reading. And they bowed down to the earth, and they brought him offerings, and he became their Lord and King. And they all dwelt with him in the city at Shinar. And Nimrod reigned in the earth over all the sons of Noah, and they were all under his power and counsel. And notice it says all the sons of Noah. These are particular lineages of people that we're speaking of here. It's important to note all these little things like that. Continuing our reading. And all the earth was of one tongue. Now notice back there it had mentioned that there were diverse tongues, all nations and tongues heard of his fame in just the previous paragraph. And now it's saying, and all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. Now, you could do a comparative between these two statements. This is commentary, of course. And you would be able to deduct a more specific understanding about what it meant when it said all the earth was of one tongue and words of union. So this could be by interpretation, such as in a nation like America, when we come together as states under the United States. Eventually we develop a common language of use. That's the case with most nations, although we're made up of peoples from all sorts of nations and tongues. So when it says the earth was all of one tongue, it means all those represented here by deductive interpretation. So we have to be careful when we're reading these ancient documents how we interpret the information, or else at times it may seem to be in conflict with itself at times, and almost a contradiction. But we don't want to assume that until we really do a comparative. I'm going to move on down to reading. But Nimrod did not go in the ways of the Lord, and he was more wicked than all the men that were before him, from the days of the flood until those days. And he made gods of wood and stone, and he bowed down to them, and he rebelled against the Lord, and taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. And Mardon, his son, was more wicked than his father. And everyone that heard, excuse me, of the acts of Mardon, the son of Nimrod, would say concerning him, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. Therefore it became a proverb in the whole earth, saying, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. And it was current in the words of men from that time to this. And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects. And the king and princes loved him, and they elevated him very high. And Terah took a wife, and her name was Amethlo, the daughter of Cornebo. And the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. Now we're going to be talking here about the birth of Abram. Excuse me. Terah was 70 years old when he begot him, and Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were with him. And it was in the night that Abram was born that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens. And he swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. Now, stop for a little commentary here. Historically, what we're talking about here is a moving sign in the heavens that appeared as what they would call a star. But what's unique, it didn't just go across the star like a meteor or a meteorite. It actually traveled in different directions, going to the 4 corners of the sky. And it says it appeared as though it swallowed up 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. Now, depending on how you want to interpret this, whether you take it from an angel view or a watcher view of interpretation, depending on which view you would use, the Africanist view, of course, would not apply here. This would be like 4 objects in the sky being gathered by one other object in the sky. So we'll leave it just with the description of Jasher and let you make what you want of it. But historically, this account was seen as a great sign in the heavens, nevertheless. Back to our reading now. Continuing reading in the book of Jasher. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight. And the sages understood this matter, and they knew its importance. And they said to each other, this only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. And the wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing yet get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, Why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall all suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And they did so. They all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground, and they said, May the king live, may the king live, may the king live. He heard that the son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of thy host. And we yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when thy servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east. And the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. We're going to continue this in part 5 of Bible Landscapes. Come back for part 5. God bless.